It's not easy saying, I'm not sure. It's not easy saying, I made a mistake. And it's not easy saying, I need help.
Mhm.
But saying those things shows such an incredible amount of strength that I think anyone who looks at vulnerability and says they're vulnerable, they're weak, they're the ones that are the problem.
Can we do it?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Influential Women, where we empower, connect, and inspire women who are leading, creating, and redefining what is possible. I'm your host, Jody O'Brien. Today, we are joined by Stacey Ryan. She's the president of School of Rock. Now, School of Rock is a global franchise system that has impacted hundreds of thousands of young people around the world. But what makes Stacey's story so compelling is not just the scale of the business that she leads, it's what she's building behind the scenes to create opportunity and visibility for women in an industry that has historically been male dominated. Today's conversation is about what it really takes to lead at scale, how to navigate being a woman in rooms where you're often the only one, how to mentor others into leadership, and why visibility and ownership are non-negotiable for women who want to build something meaningful. So let's dive in. Stacey, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jody.
Well, I'm so glad to meet you. You've
Thanks.
often been in leadership positions throughout your career in male dominated spaces. So, what has your experience been like, and how did you navigate being a woman in rooms where you were often the only one?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's something I talk about quite often because I remember many times where I sat at a boardroom table and counted the people in the room, and of 14 people in the room, I was one of 2 or 3 women, and one of them was there to get coffee and take lunch orders and take notes. And it's hard in those moments to feel like you belong, right? Because you look around and you don't see others that look like you at this table. And it was in those moments that I always had to really double down on reminding myself that I'm at the table because I belong at the table, that I have earned my spot there, that I have value to add, and continuously remind myself of that. And as I got further and further into my career, not just continuing with that, but also calling it out to others around that table and helping them look around and recognize that there's not many other women here and that is a problem and why it is. And, getting others to just pay attention to those things and look around and see it for themselves so that together we can make changes. And, I'm so proud to be in an organization where our leadership team is, 50-50. And, that's really important for us. So, anytime I'm in those situations now, I see it as an opportunity both to educate and also to advance change, because if we don't talk about it, nothing's going to happen.
Well, there's often this paradox where women in corporate leadership are either seen as too soft or too aggressive, too collaborative, or too cutthroat. How have you navigated that dynamic, and what have you learned about authenticity in leadership?
Yeah, I love that question. I don't know if I've ever been told that I was too soft in my career.
Same.
But I've definitely have been told that I have sharp edges, that, I'm too aggressive, like you said. And, it's interesting because you see men do the same thing or handle things the same way, and it's seen in a completely different perspective. They're taking, action. They have great authority and accountability, but, I'm a bitch.
Mhm.
And, through the years I've taken a lot of that feedback on and I've internalized it and I've done a lot of self-reflection, and I'm definitely not the same leader that I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, because I think to be a good leader, you're constantly evolving. You constantly have to look inward and say, okay, where can I be better? How can I change and be a better leader? And you're constantly adapting and growing for that reason. And there was a time where I was told that somebody was intimidated by me. And a turning point for me was at the moment where I realized, well, if they're intimidated by me, isn't that their issue? Why is that my issue? And, if I feel comfortable with how I'm approaching things with respect and with integrity and with authenticity and, I'll say it again, respect, and they're intimidated because maybe they're not as comfortable with their own skills or their own level, that's not mine to own.
Mhm.
I'll take it on in a way where I'll mentor and support and help, but now if I get told like, they said that you were intimidating, I'd be like, "Oh, that's sad for me to hear that, and I wonder how I can help them with that in the future." And again, I think, continuously looking inward, but also knowing that being an authentic leader comes with leading with integrity. And one of my most favorite sayings that I always say in tough moments with tough decisions is, I want to be able to put my head on my pillow at night and sleep well and rest well with the decisions that I'm making. And that helps drive a lot of those decisions, and that helps justify, a lot of the things that maybe aren't the popular decision, but the necessary decision that we have to make. And it's not easy. You get questioned every step of the way and you get doubted often, and then you start to doubt yourself and question yourself. And I've swung that pendulum in so many different directions, and I am firm. I am. And I tell everyone who's new working with me, you will never not know how I feel. And sometimes you're going to love that, and sometimes you're not, but you're never going to have to question how I feel about the job that you're doing, or if I'm upset about something. You're going to know, but we're going to
Mhm.
work through it. We're going to problem solve it. We're going to do it professionally and respectfully and with integrity with each other. And then we move forward. So, yeah, I mean, it happens often. And I think it's something that we need to continue to talk about because there's a lot of young women coming up. And what women will do is say, I was told this, and then completely try and change who they are and how they work. And now they're not their authentic selves. And now they're
Mhm.
not driving the same results that maybe they were before because they're too afraid to hold that level of accountability to their team, to have that direct feedback because they were told they're too aggressive on those things. But those are the conversations that matter. Those are the moments where change happens. And, you know, I'd say keep being yourself. If you are comfortable, if you reflect back and you feel you handled it well and with integrity and with respect, then it's on the other person to figure out. And always go into those situations with curiosity because everyone's perception is reality. So I don't want to sound too like, that doesn't matter. It does matter hearing it out and listening to it, but also just understanding that everyone's going to have an opinion. And,
Mhm.
the most important thing, the most liberating thing in your career is when you find that point where you are confident in yourself and you're comfortable and happy with your approach and what you do, and you just move forward. And everything else starts to fall in place after that.
You didn't wait for someone to create a pathway for women in your industry. You actually created Front Women. I want to understand where this came from, not just the idea, but the lived experience that made you feel like it was urgent. Front
Yeah.
Women was born not as a passion project, but as a response to real lived experience that you had, including those microaggressions and navigating leadership as a woman. Can you tell us about it?
Absolutely. Early in my career, I was told by a female supervisor that my numbers would be better if I pulled back my hair and put lipstick on. And I'm not a lipstick wearer. You could see I'm still not wearing lipstick. I don't. And I was young, I was
Mhm.
early in my career and I do like to pull my hair back at times, not because of that, but I really thought like, do I have to start putting on lipstick? I don't feel like myself in that. And I tried it a few times and I was like, no, like I that's not for me. And I guess we'll call it stubborn enough then not to take that advice. But I'm so
Mhm.
grateful that I did have that instinct in that moment and, ended up being a top performer in that organization without lipstick.
Mhm.
And I think when I got appointed the chief operating officer role here at School of Rock, it was the first time in my career that I actually felt like I could take a moment and exhale. For so many years, I was just always focused on the next step, the next step, the next step, and just, getting through, improving myself and advocating for myself and taking that next step and then doing it all over again. And when I got chief operating officer, you know, C suite roles are represented by low 20% of women.
Mhm.
That's it. And it's single digits women of color. So I was part of a very small group who actually broke that glass ceiling at that level. And with that relief also came this amazing wave of new responsibility that I felt. And because I have finally gotten there, I felt like, okay, now I have to help all of the women who are coming up behind me, who are fighting and following that same path that I did for these 20 years. And that's where the idea of Front Women came from. Just a group of amazing people, because it's not just women. We have, a lot of men who join. One in particular is a father of two sons. And he comes to learn because he wants to teach his sons to be better advocates and partners for the women in their lives as they grow up. And we get together on a quarterly basis. We talk through all different situations. We talk through the beauty standards that women face that are different, how to recognize and fight microaggressions. We talk about how to advocate for yourself during performance reviews because women tend not to ask for the things. And, when there's a job application, studies show that women will look at the requirements for the job, a skill set, and say, I don't have all of those, and they don't apply. Where men will look at it and say, I don't have all of those, but I'm going to apply. And when you go from entry level being a 50-50 split between men and women, and then you go to a manager level and you start to see that gap grow. And every level it gets larger and larger. And it's because we're not advocating for ourselves. We're being too cautious. We're being too patient almost in a way. So, front women, we work on those types of skills. We learn from other women who are doing incredible things and their stories and lean on mentorship. And I think my favorite one was debunking imposter syndrome and really getting to the root of where that came from, where it was invented, and how to overcome it. Because I haven't met a single woman yet who has told me I've never felt imposter syndrome. So I'm hoping to continue to just get rid of that language.
It's so funny that you bring that up. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with my dad, and I was saying, Dad, I just feel like such an imposter today. Like I'm having this imposter, and he's a baby boomer, right? And so he's like, okay, what do you mean by that? So I was explaining it to him, and he's like, well, that's just dumb. He's just so frank. He was like, you need to own it. Well, it's a lot easier for late 70s, year old man to tell me to just own it than for me and my body,
Right.
to believe
Right.
that. And so I thought that was so interesting. And,
Yeah.
it is learning where that deep seed comes from. Well, you've been graced with incredible mentors throughout your career. How intentional have you been about recreating that experience for other women? And what do you think mentorship actually does for women in corporate spaces?
Yeah. I think mentorship as a whole is an incredibly powerful concept, idea, and something that everybody should have. And I'm a big believer in the layered mentorship, right? So you should have your mentor who's at that level that you're aspiring to be, that you're learning from. You should have that mentor at your level that you're learning together and learning with. And then you should be mentoring somebody who is following your footsteps and could learn from you. And it's really great when you have that holistic round because you're getting it from every angle. At Front Women, our goal is to connect women and help them learn from each other, connect the dots. We would love to have more of a formal mentorship type of program. That's something that we've spoken about. And as our community grows, probably something that we'll explore again. But a lot of it happens organically. I personally, because like you said, I've been blessed with so many amazing mentors. That didn't just happen though. I went after them. There were moments I will never forget where, I was running a learning center with Huntington Learning Center, and the CEO came in to tour my location because I had a top location and she was new. And she said to me, I want to learn what you're doing here in your school. We should grab lunch sometime. I'm like, that would be amazing. And then she left. And here I am, 4 levels down from her at that point. And after 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
I want to have lunch.
I want to have lunch. I sent her an email. And I still remember the nerves that I had because this organization was very hierarchical and you don't, go above your boss's head in any way. So I knew that there was a little bit of risk that I was taking, but I'm like, she said she wanted to have lunch with me. So I shot her an email and just said, would love to, grab that time together and tell you some of the things that we're doing here and learn more about you. And here's some availability that I have, but I can accommodate yours if you're interested. And I got a response in under an hour, and we ended up meeting for dinner. And that was the start of my first real mentor that I had. And she was my mentor for over 12 years. And I learned so much from her. And then we reached a point we started learning together, which was beautiful also. Mentors will come and go in your life as your career changes, as your life changes. And, I've changed my mentors based off of what I was focusing on and what I was aspiring, because that changes also. And I also have mentors for all different things.
Mhm.
I have one person for business, I have one person maybe for life, one person for relationship, and find those different things. But because I've been so blessed, I try and give back in that regard. I had, a woman reach out to me a couple of times. This has happened just on LinkedIn and just introduced themselves and said, I would love to have a conversation with you. And this is why. And I will find 30 minutes to talk to somebody, to talk to a stranger who I don't know. If I can be helpful in any way for them, I'm open to that. I make myself available. And some may say I make myself too available, which is why most of my days are back to back to back to back. Again, if I can help someone the way that somebody helped me and just answer that email the way this woman did, I'm going to do that because I don't know where I would be if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, she really paid it forward. I mean, it's kind of like, paying for the coffee in the drive-through for the person in front of you. Then you end up paying for the coffee. And that line of blessing just doesn't stop. It
Yep.
just doesn't stop when one person can spark that match or whatever, light that match. Well, it brings up a good point about isolation because one thing that I hear from a lot of women in corporate environments is how isolated they feel. They're climbing the ladder, but they're doing it alone. And I would like to know how you believe that front women changing that narrative, at the base level there, what does that do to community? And what does that mean to you as a leader?
Community is so important. It's one of the most special and unique things here at School of Rock that I'm incredibly proud of. And building the Front Women community. Front Women is a passion project, right? It is something that we do outside of our work hours, and we're typically, we're not a well organized, well running machine. We are two women futzing around trying to figure out what's the best thing to do. How are we going to do it? Oh my God, is the Zoom working? Do we know how to break into groups? And every time we're frazzled and we do a call and we're like, gosh, is this worth it? And then we get flooded with the emails after and the gratitude from the women who came and the comments about what they've learned and how it's resonating with them, hearing from other people and talking about these topics. And we never record a Front Women call because we want people to feel comfortable and feel like they are in a safe space and to just really feel okay sharing anything that's on their mind and not fearing that it's going to come back in any way. And because of those responses, that's our fuel. That's what keeps us going. And we're like, all right, we're going to keep this going because it is making a difference. And, our community is small. The Front Women community is probably about 100 people who are on our mailing list and, approximately like 40 who join on a regular basis. But we started out with 10 and we continue to grow. And every time a new person comes, we ask them to share. And anyone can join our mailing list by going to frontwomen.org. Join the mailing list. You'll get our newsletters. You'll see when our calls are happening. But the community that it's building has been incredible. We even have someone down in Mexico who reached out and said, how can I take it and translate it to Spanish, because I feel like we have so many women here in South America that would benefit from this and they're missing out on it. So there's the need, there's the desire, and there's a ton of great organizations out there on a larger scale. Front Women is a little bit more smaller, a little bit more intimate, and we want it that way because we want to continue to learn from each other and not necessarily from PowerPoints and presentations. And that's how we build that community. When we break people into the groups and it's just 4 or 5 of them and they're talking about something deep and personal that they're struggling with in their workplace, in regards to beauty standards or the way that they've been given feedback in their last performance review, and hearing from the others and workshopping it together. It creates this special bond and this safety that we all have with each other. And it's been really wonderful to be a part of it and to watch it happen. I don't take full credit for it. We just create the platform for everybody, but it's the people who come that really make it as special as it is.
Well, there's something really powerful about hearing you and about a woman who is willing to step up and say, I'm going to lead this, I'm going to create this space. But I know for a lot of women listening, it feels risky, especially in corporate environments where the culture isn't always welcoming to that kind of initiative. So, what would you say to a woman who feels hesitant to create her own opportunity?
That's a great question. I would try and ask yourself why you're feeling hesitant. Get to the root of that feeling, the root of that problem, and take on a partner. Again, being blessed with amazing mentors. One of those was, my boss here, and who is a white male. And he observed many things. I'll never forget, we were at a conference and we were talking with a bunch of new partners, and it was a bunch of white men in suits and me. And what happened in the conversation is they started to just box me out almost. And I ended up standing on the outside. And they're throwing all these ideas at, my boss at the time was CEO. And what he did was said, these are all great. And you could tell me them all you want, but she decides if we do them. And all the heads turned to me. And I was just like, hi. And then I got promoted to chief operating officer, and I got a note from one of them that said, I always knew you had this. And my response was, you didn't, but that's okay, because I'm excited to work closer with you moving forward. And, That's not an easy thing to say. And not all the conversations are easy. So if you're hesitant on creating that path, it's because probably it's coming from a place of fear. And none of these uncomfortable moments happen for the growth. You have to have those uncomfortable moments.
Hmm.
To take that step forward, it's going to be a little bit scary. I bungee jumped. It was one of the most amazing cathartic moments of my life. I had to take that step off that bridge. And
Hmm.
that was terrifying. And some of these conversations are scary, but what's the purpose behind them? And that's what you want to focus on. And when I had this idea for Front Women and reached out to my boss and said, this is what I want to do, this is why I want to do it, I had a whole plan worked up. What is the name? What is the mission? What are we going to be doing? Here's a sample agenda. Like I created the vision. It wasn't, I have an idea. It's like, here is my vision. Here's the reason for it. And I had support immediately right out of the gate. So I think a lot of it is who you're having the conversations with, but also how you're presenting these things as well, which is important. And that's something that you have direct control over, that you can really prepare for and walk into and present these ideas in the best way possible.
I always think that's one thing we do have control over is our organization. And oftentimes I am not an organized person, but man, if you have it together when you walk in the room and you know where you're going, what you want to say, what the problem is, the solution, why you're the person to help, like when you have it down, you walk in with an air of confidence and that speaks volumes.
The other side of that is also not always being the one with the answer, right?
Right,
You
right.
don't always have to have the answer. There's so much power in saying, "You know what? I don't know that, but I'm going to find out. Let me look into that and I'll get back to you." Or
Mhm.
I have an idea, but Jody's actually the expert in that one. Let me bring her into this conversation so we can really dig into it together. And there's a lot of power in that as well.
Well, School of Rock's model, is built around performance, which includes mistakes. And students, they step on the stage. Of course, they're going to mess up, they're going to recover, and they have their band supporting them all the way through it. But
Yeah.
it's a powerful framework for understanding vulnerability in leadership. So, how has that philosophy shaped the way that you lead? And what would you say to leaders who think vulnerability is a weakness?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of what I had just said, that power and not always having the answer, and that is something that I learned through my journey. I thought I always had to have the answer. That saying fake it till you make it. Like I faked it and I figured it out after. Even joining here at School of Rock, my first call, I'm not a musician. My first call was with Lollapalooza. They said we need your stage plot and your back line and you're all set. I said, sure, no problem. You'll have it end of day. And frantically Googled, what is a stage plot? What is a backline? And how do I make one? And I learned a lot, but I made a lot of mistakes also. And I think the thing about mistakes is they're missteps. They're small stumbles, but you regain your footing and you keep moving forward. And, it's not, there's that old saying, it's not if you fall, it's how you get up. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
truth behind that. And my rule with my team is you can make any mistake once, right? Because we're not making mistakes that are life or death situations here. But if you make a mistake, we're going to talk about it. And I know we're going to talk about it because I'm going to have the conversation with you together and we're going to learn from it together. And then we move forward. Now, if you make that same mistake again, it's going to be a different conversation. But the first one, it's like, okay, you made a mistake. Let's talk about it. Why was it a mistake? What could you have done differently? And like take that learning opportunity and take it and move and adjust on how you take those next steps forward. I think I've made so many mistakes in my career on every single level, and I'm probably my toughest critic. And I'm always seeking that feedback and asking for it. My first board meeting presentation when we had a new CEO with him, I was like, "Oh, a new person to give me feedback." And after I asked him, "Okay, how did I do?" "You did great." "No." I'm like, "Thank you, but there has to be more to that. That's all you have for me?" He's like, "Okay, you want more?" "Yes, I want more." "Let's talk tomorrow." "Great, let's talk tomorrow." And I wanna hear, I wanna hear the things I did well, of course, but I also wanna hear the things where, "Hey, I think you could do a little bit better if you had more advanced knowledge in this area." "Okay, let me go and learn about that." So having that curiosity and that hunger and that desire for that tough feedback and the ability to shut up and listen to the feedback and not get defensive, which was also very hard in the beginning, is very powerful because it gives you that other perspective. It gives you that other side and it helps you understand the areas that are going to help you be a better leader. And I have gone from feeling like I always need the answer to feeling like they're the ones that should have the answer. I am blessed with an amazing team that I work with, and I am grateful for them on a regular basis, and I share that with them on a regular basis. And being able to work with such an incredible, passionate, knowledgeable group of people, it allows us all to feel safe in saying, I'm not really sure. Do you know? No. Okay, let's see who can help us figure this out. And to answer more specifically about vulnerability, I think vulnerability is such a strength, and that's not something that I thought early in my career, and not something that I felt for a very, very long time. But showing vulnerability shows humanity, and that creates an opportunity for people to see you are just another person. And I can feel comfortable coming to you with, I'm trying to say the word problem less and puzzle more with this puzzle I'm trying to solve right now and to work through it with you. And it's important for me that anyone who I'm working with knows that I'm always here. I'm always available. I'm always rooting for you and on your side. And if there is a puzzle that is happening, I'm here to help you to work through it together and to figure it out together. So I think being vulnerable shows a significant amount of strength because it's not easy saying, I'm not sure. It's not easy saying, I made a mistake. And it's not easy saying, I need help.
Hmm.
But saying those things shows such an incredible amount of strength that I think anyone who looks at vulnerability and says they're vulnerable, they're weak, they're the ones that are the problem.
You are a great leader, and I would love if you would be leading my organization. That would be such an honor to have a leader who has such emotional intelligence because even though it's the buzzword, we talk about it all the time, people need to learn it. A lot of people struggle with that. And so we're talking about vulnerability. You have a story about walking away from a senior role with no safety net. Then came another misaligned organization. You went through a divorce and everything unraveled all at once. That's not usually what we highlight when we talk to women about strategic career moves, but you framed this as the most strategic move that you've ever made. So, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it was a wild time of my life, but one I am so incredibly grateful for. And I am a big believer that everything happens for a reason. And even if you're unsure in those moments, when you fast forward and are able to reflect back, it becomes clearer. And this was one of those. So I was doing well at an organization that I frankly thought I was going to start and end my career at. Again, I was early in my career, young, and I was learning underneath that supervisor who told me I would be better if I put on lipstick, and I was managing people in a way that I knew I was expected to manage them. And notice I'm saying manage and not lead. And it wasn't in a way that I was proud of. And I'll never forget the moment I had a staff member who had a family emergency and needed a support. You needed some humanity in that moment. And I reacted in the way that I knew my supervisor would want me to react. And I went home that night and I didn't like who I was seeing in the mirror. And it was in that moment that I realized that I'm at a pivotal moment where I am either going to be shaped into exactly the type of person that this organization wants me to be, or I'm going to be shaped into a person that I'm actually proud of when I look in the mirror. And it was that next Monday that I walked into the office and I resigned. And I gave notice and I had no job. And I decided to take some time off to really reflect, to detox, and to really figure out where and who I wanted to be in my career in that moment. And after some time off, I reached out to that CEO who I referred to before as a mentor. She had since moved on. And I reached out to ask her if she would be a reference for me because I was going to start looking for a job. And she said, "No need, I want you here." And I ended up at the organization that she was at that time. And I met with the board and with the CEO, and they created a position for me. And I launched a department within operations that hadn't existed. And I was told when I joined that organization, the entire team was told not to speak to me because they didn't like this other woman who was in the organization. And what they were told was, "She's aligned with her, stay away." So I didn't know this. And I walk in and I'm like excited to meet everyone, and nobody would even talk to me. And it took months for people to actually learn Stacey and who I was, and then started coming around and talking to me. And there was a small group of people, one of them who was actually on my team here at School of Rock still for many years, who didn't listen to that person and got to know me right out of the gate and didn't partake in the segregation of me in any way. So I was there for a few years and the culture was better, but it still didn't feel great to me. And I realized at that point that maybe corporate America wasn't for me. Maybe it's just too cutthroat. Maybe it's too cold. Maybe it's just not the right fit for me. So I decided to sign a franchise agreement with that organization and try and create my own culture and create a space that was mine that I was proud of. So I couldn't be a franchisee and a corporate employee at the same time. So I promoted a woman on my team to take over the department, transferred, and I stepped out of the corporate role. And I was going to start consulting because I had a few months to kill. That same woman had then moved on to CEO here at School of Rock. And I reached out and I said, "I'm going to start consulting. I have great relationships with the two organizations I've been with franchisees. If you know anyone who would benefit, let me know." Once again, she said, "No need. I want you here. Start tomorrow." So I came here as a consultant with no intention of staying. It's been 11 years that I'm here, and now I'm the president, and now I have no intentions of leaving. But while I was consulting and working towards opening my franchise, my lease fell through in the final hour. And I thought my world was collapsing and everything was coming to an end. And then I joined School of Rock full time because it was going to take more time to find a new site. And my whole timeline got pushed out drastically to what I thought was my dream. And then I realized that I was in an abusive marriage and I couldn't continue with that. So I canceled my franchise agreement and I filed for divorce. And that was a hard thing to do. And I fully committed here to School of Rock. I had already seen what was happening here and I fell in love with it, and the culture is amazing. And I wasn't disappointed with that at all. But I ended up, when we had a new CEO come in, I was 2 nights fresh, living in my parents' house, sleeping on an air mattress with my two dogs, with one suitcase of clothes, all of my belongings scattered across my friends' garages because they helped me move out in 6 hours because of a bad situation and an abusive situation. And I had to say to this brand new CEO, "I promise you that I'm working and you will be happy with what you get from me, but my life is in disarray right now. I'm getting it in order, but for the next few days, if you call me and it sounds like I'm not at a desk, It's possible that I'm just out taking care of something very quickly, but
Mhm.
I'll always get my stuff done." And he trusted me. And, he took that risk with me. And then after a few months, he asked me to relocate up to Massachusetts and to work with him, work closer with him, help him open the new office here and learn from him. And it was the exact moment where I needed to start learning from somebody different. And it was an amazing move for me and a perfect move. And every step of the way was terrifying. And every step of the way, I thought that it was a new rock bottom that I was hitting. But when I look back at the cancellation of the franchise agreement, my divorce, having to abandon my apartment and move in with my parents with 6 hours' notice, all of those rock bottoms opened up the opportunities that brought me to my highest of highs. So it's like the lowest of lows were necessary to bring me to my highest of highs. If I didn't lose the rights to my apartment, if I didn't have to leave that, when I was asked to relocate up to Massachusetts, I wouldn't have been able to because I would have had a mortgage I was responsible for and a condo and all of this stuff. But I had been liberated of that in a way that was terrible, that I thought was devastating. But when I look back, I'm like, wow, thank God that happened because then I
Mhm.
wouldn't be here. So, it's almost like the universe forced me on the path that I was supposed to be on. And I take things very differently now. I mean, when bad things happen, it's still bad, right? You still are taking it and absorbing it and are shocked by it. But I always try and say, okay, this is happening for a reason. And I may not know that now, but I will figure it out eventually. And what's the learning in this moment? Where's the growth in this moment? And where's the opportunity in this moment? Because again, if my rock bottom hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I have had all my dreams come true since being able to come up here.
That's really beautiful, Stacey. And those broken pieces, I mean, they make for beautiful pottery. And I just love that analogy so much because the broken places are where we grow the most. Looking back, they're the most beautiful pieces. But that isn't an easy time to go through. And I've talked to a lot of people recently about the importance of being an empathetic leader and an empathetic manager, an empathetic leader of people, people leader. And someone suggested yesterday, like, that really is keeping the company safe when you have an empathetic leader. It's keeping it clean, it's keeping it safe, it's keeping it functional. And you were privy to one of those. You had that opportunity to have such an empathetic leader in those moments. How has that made you a better leader?
It's given me permission to be that, right? Because as a woman, it's this really terrible conundrum of you can't be empathetic, right? Because then you're being too maternal, you're being too soft, you're being too easy, but you also can't be too aggressive because then you're, being bitchy and you're, just too tough and too sharp and too hard. And it's constantly trying to find that balance. But I have taken so much pride in my ability to be an empathetic leader with integrity and with truth and with safety. So it allowed me, I'll never forget, there was a situation where we had a team member, we were at a major event, and he overslept. He overslept, he slept through an alarm. We ended up in a position where not only was I calling, texting, everything, I ended up having to send hotel security to the room to check on them because I was concerned something had happened and they had just overslept, forgot to
Mhm.
set the alarm, whatever it was. And I'll never forget, I was so disappointed because I have a high level of accountability. This was a big event for us. He was needed and he let the whole team down. And my boss pulled me aside and he said, "Take a walk with me." He said, "As hard as you can be on him, he's going to be harder on himself. So go easy." And I'll never forget that advice that he gave me. And it brought me from like a 12 to like a 6. And it completely changed the conversation that I had with that team member. It completely changed our relationship because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to do a terrible job today, or I'm going to make a horrible mistake today. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody wakes up wanting to be great and to excel and to do well. So when we make those mistakes, it's looking inward and fixing it inward. And it's having those people that can talk through it with them and say, like, I screwed up. And it's like, you did. But what's the lesson? What would you do differently? What if this were to happen again? And solve that puzzle with together. So I would say the biggest thing is it gave me permission to do it in a way that I felt safe, that I felt like I didn't have to hide being empathetic. I didn't have to hide having that compassion and that care and that deep adoration. I love my team. I care about them. They're humans. They're people who I rely on, who I spend a lot of time with, and I love them. And I want only the best things for them. And I always tell them, if that's here at School of Rock, amazing. If the best thing for you is outside of here, you still have my full support. That doesn't change our relationship because I only want what's best for every individual. And I think that being able to have that really strengthens bonds and relationships. And I have great relationships with people who I worked with or haven't worked with for 20 years. And we still learn together and learn from each other and support each other. And it's because of those deep rooted relationships that we built.
Stacey Ryan, it has been a pleasure getting to know you today. Leading School of Rock, I mean, what an accomplishment. But what's even better is learning what a great human you are. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jody. That means a lot.
And to our listeners of Influential Women, we thank you for listening today. Of course, we're here to empower you, to connect you to other women, and inspire women who are leading, creating, and redefining what's possible. Until next time.
Can we do it?